The concept of right person, wrong time is a staple of modern romance. But often, the wrong time is actually a fearful mind. Navigating a relationship with a man who is terrified of his own feelings is like trying to walk through a beautiful, lush garden that is surrounded by a high-voltage electric fence. You can see the beauty, you can smell the flowers, and you can see him standing on the other side looking at you with undeniable longing. But every time you try to step closer, the alarm bells go off, and he retreats into the shadows. This experience is uniquely painful because it isn't defined by a lack of chemistry or a lack of love. Rather, it is defined by a lack of safety within himself. To understand why a man would run from the very thing he desires, we have to look at the anatomy of emotional fear. For most people, love is a sanctuary, a goal to be achieved. But for someone struggling with an avoidant or disorganized attachment style, love is a perceived threat to their survival. In their internal world, intimacy is inextricably linked to a loss of autonomy, the pain of inevitable abandonment, or the suffocating weight of expectation. They view the merging of two lives not as a partnership, but as an invasion. When he starts to feel that spark turning into a real flame, his nervous system doesn't register it as joy. It registers it as a code red emergency. He isn't reacting to you. He is reacting to the ghost of every person who let him down, smothered him, or left him before he was ready to say goodbye. This dynamic creates a dizzying atmosphere for the partner. You find yourself constantly analyzing micro-signals, a long hug, a sudden cold text, a look of pure adoration followed by a week of silence. You start to feel like a detective in your own relationship, trying to piece together a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape. The most confusing part is that his fear often looks like disinterest or arrogance to the untrained eye. He might act too cool to care or pretend that he's just a lone wolf who doesn't need anyone. But if you look closely, you'll see the cracks in that armor. You'll see the man who is paralyzed between his heart's hunger for connection and his brain's desperate need for protection. The following 15 signs are designed to help you distinguish between a man who simply doesn't care and a man who is caught in an agonizing internal war. Recognizing these signs isn't about fixing him, because you cannot love someone into being brave, but about gaining the clarity you need to protect your own heart. It's about realizing that his behavior is a reflection of his internal battles, not a measurement of your worth. When you understand the why behind his distance, you can stop blaming yourself for his inability to stay close. 1. The classic push-pull dynamic. The push-pull dynamic is perhaps the most exhausting hallmark of a man who is terrified of his own feelings. At its core, this behavior is a defense mechanism rooted in an avoidant or disorganized attachment style. When he pushes, he is seeking closeness, intimacy, and the warmth of your company. In these moments, he is present, affectionate, and perhaps even the version of himself you fell for. However, once that intimacy reaches a certain threshold, a danger zone where he feels his independence or emotional safety is at risk, the pull begins. This retreat isn't usually a conscious choice to be cruel. It is an instinctive reaction to the feeling of being engulfed. To a man who fears love, intimacy feels like a loss of self. As he gets closer to you, his internal alarm system goes off, suggesting that if he stays this close, he will become vulnerable to pain, rejection, or control. Consequently, he creates distance. He might stop texting for a few days, become busy with work, or act strangely aloof during your next date. This distance serves as his recharge station where he can regain his sense of autonomy. The tragedy of the push-pull cycle is that it creates a trauma bond. For you, the push moments of high affection feel like a reward, making the pull moments feel like a personal rejection. You might find yourself trying harder to regain that initial warmth, which ironically triggers his fear even more, causing him to pull back further. This isn't a lack of interest. If he weren't interested, he would simply leave. The fact that he keeps coming back, the push, proves the attraction is there. But the fact that he leaves, the pull, proves that his fear is currently stronger than his desire for a stable partnership. It is a constant internal tug-of-war between his heart's desire for connection and his brain's perceived need for survival. 2. Panic after intimate moments. This sign is specifically tied to the vulnerability hangover that occurs immediately following a breakthrough. You might have a night where you talk for 6 hours, share deep childhood secrets, or have a particularly soulful physical connection. In the moment, it feels like the walls have finally come down. You go to sleep thinking the relationship has reached a new level, only to wake up to a man who feels like a complete stranger. This panic is a physiological and psychological reaction to emotional exposure. When a man fears love, he views his secrets and his deep emotions as his weak points. By sharing them with you, he has essentially handed you a map of how to hurt him. The morning after a deep connection, his ego steps in to protect him from the perceived threat of your influence. He might feel a sense of shame or exposure, leading him to overcompensate by acting hypermasculine, cold, or dismissive of the previous night's depth. You may notice him downplaying the event later. If you mention how lovely the conversation was, he might shrug it off or change the subject. This is his way of trying to rewrite the narrative so that he doesn't feel owned by the emotion. The panic often manifests as a sudden need for physical space or a sharp change in tone. He is essentially trying to reset the boundary that he accidentally let you cross. Understanding this panic is crucial because it helps distinguish between a man who doesn't care and a man who cares too much and can't handle the weight of it. A man who doesn't care won't have a hangover because he wasn't truly vulnerable. He was just performing. A man who is scared, however, will look like a deer in headlights because he realized he let you see the real him, and now he is terrified of what you might do with that power. 3. Consistency is lacking. Consistency is the bedrock of a secure relationship, but for a man gripped by the fear of loving you, it is the very thing he avoids. When a person is consistent, they become predictable. When they are predictable, they are reliable. To a fearful heart, being reliable feels like a trap. If he shows up for you every Tuesday at 7 p.m., he has established a pattern that you will eventually come to expect. The moment you expect something from him, he feels the weight of responsibility. And with responsibility comes the terrifying possibility of letting you down or, conversely, of you becoming too important to him. This lack of consistency is rarely about his schedule and almost always about his internal emotional thermostat. When he feels too much love or connection, he instinctively turns the dial down to cool things off. You might experience a week of beautiful, attentive text messages followed by 3 days of silence. This intermittent reinforcement is incredibly confusing for the partner. It creates a dynamic where you are constantly trying to solve the puzzle of his behavior. He isn't necessarily playing games. He is likely struggling with an internal on-off switch. When the switch is on, he is genuinely enamored and present. When the switch is off, it is because his fear has convinced him that he is losing his independence or that he is getting too deep into a situation he can't control. This inconsistency serves as a safety buffer. By staying unpredictable, he ensures that the relationship never gains enough momentum to reach a point of no return. It allows him to keep one foot out the door at all times, convincing himself that he is still in control of his emotions, even when his heart is clearly pulling him toward you. 4. He avoids defining the relationship. The talk, the conversation where you define the relationship, DTR, is the ultimate nightmare for a man afraid of love. To you, a label like boyfriend or partner represents security, clarity, and a shared vision. To him, that same label represents a contract that he isn't sure he can fulfill. He might treat you exactly like a girlfriend, taking you to dinner, meeting your friends, or spending every weekend together. But the moment the word exclusive or relationship is mentioned, he freezes or deflects. This avoidance is rooted in the fear of future obligation. As long as there is no label, he can tell himself that he is free. It is a linguistic loophole that allows him to enjoy the benefits of your company while maintaining a psychological exit ramp. He might use phrases like, "Why do we need labels if we're happy?" or "Let's just see where this goes." While these sound like reasonable requests for patience, in the context of a long-term fearful dynamic, they are actually defensive walls. By refusing to define the relationship, he is trying to protect himself from the perceived failure of a breakup. In his mind, if it was never official, then it can't technically end in a way that breaks his heart or yours. He is trying to live in a perpetual gray area where the stakes are low. The irony, of course, is that by avoiding the label, he creates the very instability and anxiety that eventually destroys the connection. He is so afraid of the relationship ending that he refuses to let it truly begin. 5. A focus on minor flaws. When a man is scared of how much he likes you, his brain will often go on a search and destroy mission to find reasons why you aren't the right one. This is known as deactivation. Because he cannot handle the intensity of his feelings for you, he looks for deal breakers to justify his urge to pull away. These are usually insignificant things: the way you laugh, a specific outfit you wore, or a minor difference in your musical tastes. You might find him suddenly becoming critical or nitpicking your behavior. This isn't because you are doing anything wrong. It's because he needs to convince himself that you aren't perfect so that he doesn't have to fully commit. If he can convince himself that you talk too much or that your lifestyle is too different, he feels a sense of relief. It gives him a logical reason to keep his distance. It is much easier for his ego to say, "She's not the one because of minor flaw," than to admit, "I am terrified of how much I care about her." This hyperfocus on flaws acts as an emotional eject button. It allows him to dampen the chemistry and attraction he feels. When he starts to feel that spark turning into a flame, he pours cold water on it by obsessing over a tiny disagreement you had 3 weeks ago. It is a classic sabotage tactic used by those who feel unworthy of love or those who view love as a loss of autonomy. By making you lesser in his mind, he makes the prospect of losing you feel less devastating. 6. Self-sabotage when things are good. Self-sabotage is the emergency brake of a fearful heart. It usually happened right after a period of harmony, perhaps a perfect weekend getaway or a week where everything felt easy. For a man afraid of love, happiness is actually a source of high anxiety. When things are going well, the stakes are raised. He feels he has more to lose. To lower those stakes, he subconsciously creates a problem to disrupt the peace. He might pick a senseless fight over a trivial topic, bring up an ex-girlfriend, or suddenly become too busy to see you. This behavior is an attempt to regulate the emotional temperature. By introducing conflict, he creates a buffer of tension that makes him feel less vulnerable. It is a tragic cycle where he destroys the very thing he wants because the presence of that thing makes him feel like he is standing on the edge of a cliff. He would rather push you away on his own terms than wait for the inevitable moment where he believes you will leave him. 7. Deflecting emotion with humor. While a good sense of humor is usually a trait to be admired, a fearful man uses it as an emotional shield. Whenever a conversation begins to lean toward the sentimental, the serious, or the deeply personal, he will crack a joke or make a sarcastic comment to break the tension. This isn't because he doesn't understand the depth of the moment. It's because the depth makes him feel naked, and humor is the clothing he puts on to hide. By turning a serious moment into a joke, he regains power over the situation. It allows him to keep the interaction light and fun, which are safe territories for him. If he laughs, he doesn't have to cry, and he doesn't have to admit that he feels a profound connection to you. This can be incredibly frustrating for a partner seeking a soul-to-soul connection, as it feels like you are constantly hitting a brick wall of wit. He is essentially saying, "I'll give you my laughter, but I'm not ready to give you my heart." 8. Heavy emphasis on independence. A man who fears love often equates intimacy with entrapment. He will frequently mention how much he loves his freedom or how he is a lone wolf. This isn't necessarily a reflection of his lifestyle, but rather a preemptive strike against the possibility of being controlled or changed by a relationship. He views your needs or requests for time as demands that threaten his autonomy. This hyperindependence is a trauma response. He likely feels that to be in a relationship means he has to give up his identity. Therefore, he keeps you at arm's length to prove to himself that he is still his own man. He might make a point of making plans without you or reminding you that he doesn't need anyone. It is a defensive posture designed to hide the fact that he is actually quite dependent on the validation and comfort you provide. He just can't admit it because it feels like a weakness. 9. He sends mixed signals constantly. Mixed signals are the external manifestation of an internal war. One day he is sending you songs that remind him of you, and the next he is liking your photos but not replying to your texts. This is not a game in the traditional sense. It is the sound of his approach system fighting his avoidance system. His heart wants to approach you because you are wonderful, but his fear wants to avoid you because you are dangerous to his emotional status quo. This creates a breadcrumb effect. He gives you just enough attention to keep you around, but not enough to let the relationship progress. When he feels he has drifted too far away, he panics and sends a warm signal to reel you back in. When you respond with warmth, he feels the threat of intimacy again and retreats. You are left feeling like you are on a roller coaster, never knowing which version of him you are going to get. 10. Fear of future planning. For a fearful man, the future is a scary, undefined space where anything could go wrong. Consequently, he will be extremely hesitant to commit to anything more than a few days or weeks in advance. If you ask about a wedding 6 months away or even a concert next month, he might get visibly uncomfortable or give a non-committal "we'll see." Planning for the future requires an admission that he intends for you to be in it. To him, making a plan is like signing a contract. It removes his exit strategy. By keeping the future vague, he maintains the illusion that he is not tied down. It allows him to live in a state of perpetual now, where he doesn't have to face the terrifying reality that he is actually building a life with someone. His inability to plan isn't a lack of organization. It's a lack of emotional safety. 11. Vulnerability hangovers. A vulnerability hangover is the psychological equivalent of a physical crash after a night of overindulgence. In this context, the substance is emotional intimacy. You might have a breakthrough evening where he finally opens up about his childhood, his fears, or how much he truly cares for you. During the moment, the connection is electric and undeniable. However, the next day, he feels an intense sense of regret, not because he lied, but because he was too honest. This hangover manifests as a sharp withdrawal. He might become cold, formal, or even ghost you for a few days. To him, being seen so clearly feels like a loss of power. He feels exposed and weak for having let his guard down. To regain his sense of safety, he retreats into his shell to repair his armor. He needs to prove to himself that he doesn't actually need that level of connection to survive. This cycle is incredibly painful for you because it punishes the very moments of closeness that are supposed to strengthen a bond. 12. He keeps his past guarded. Information is power, and a man afraid of love is very careful about what intelligence he shares. You may know the basics of his life, where he works, his favorite movies, his general hobbies, but notice a massive black hole when it comes to his romantic history or deep-seated pains. If you ask about his last breakup or why he hasn't been in a long-term relationship, he will likely give you a short, rehearsed answer or quickly flip the question back on you. This secrecy isn't usually because he's hiding a dark criminal past. It's because his past contains the blueprints of his fear. Whether it was a parent who let him down or an ex who broke his heart, those experiences are the why behind his current walls. By keeping his past guarded, he prevents you from truly understanding his triggers. If you don't know what scares him, you can't navigate around it, and he remains unknowable. As long as he is a mystery, he feels he has the upper hand in the relationship. 13. Subtle emotional withdrawal. Unlike a pull, which is often dramatic and obvious, subtle emotional withdrawal is a quiet, slow fading that happens just when things feel too comfortable. It's the transition from long, soulful gazes to him constantly looking at his phone while you talk. It's a way he stops asking deep questions about your day and sticks to surface-level small talk. He is physically present in the room, but his spirit feels like it's 1,000 miles away. This is a calibration tactic. He is trying to find a safe distance where he can still have you in his life without feeling the heat of true intimacy. If the relationship gets too hot, he withdraws just enough to make it lukewarm. This is often the most confusing sign because there is no big fight or obvious catalyst. He is simply trying to dull the connection so it doesn't overwhelm his nervous system. He wants the companionship, but he is terrified of the merging that happens when two people become truly emotionally integrated. 14. Overthinking every interaction. For a man who isn't afraid, a relationship is a natural flow. For a man gripped by fear, Every interaction is a high-stakes chess match. You might notice that he seems remarkably stiff or careful with his words, as if he is mentally editing himself in real time. This overthinking is a byproduct of his hypervigilance. He is constantly scanning the relationship for threats, signs that he is getting too deep, signs that you are expecting more from him, or signs that he is losing his grip on his own life. This internal noise makes it impossible for him to be truly present. He might take hours to reply to a simple, affectionate text, not because he is busy, but because he is dissecting the implications of his response. If he acts too happy, will you think he's ready for marriage? If he says, "I miss you," will he lose his power? This mental exhaustion eventually leads to him shutting down entirely. He isn't being calculated to hurt you. He is simply so overwhelmed by his own internal what-ifs that he paralyzes the relationship's natural growth to keep the status quo. 15. The intense stare versus hesitant actions. This is perhaps the most heartbreaking sign, the massive gap between how he looks at you and how he treats you. You will catch him looking at you with a gaze that is raw, deep, and filled with unmistakable longing. The kind of look that says, "I love you," without a single word being spoken. However, the moment you acknowledge that look or try to lean into it, he snaps back into his safe persona. His actions remain hesitant, non-committal, or even cold, creating a jarring cognitive dissonance for you. This happens because his instincts and his trauma are at war. His instincts recognize you as a safe, beautiful, and loving partner, which is why his eyes, the windows to his soul, give him away. But his trauma, his fear of being hurt, abandoned, or controlled, controls his physical actions and his speech. He is essentially a person standing outside a beautiful home in the freezing cold. He wants to go inside more than anything, but he is terrified that the moment he steps through the door, the house will collapse. He stays on the porch, staring through the window, unable to commit to the warmth he so clearly craves.